So, what did we learn last night on HBO Boxing? Well, in the opener, we learned that Cletus Selden, we're probably never going to see him again. You know, with that fight against Ulysses, to me, it looked like a guy sparring for the first time. Selden looked like a guy who, those early counter punches from Ulysses that dropped him, I think it was dropped in the first 3 rounds, it just looked like a guy who was shocked, who had never experienced a counterpunch coming back at him like that. It looked like a guy, you've seen it, guys sparring for the first time in the gym. That's what it looked like to me. And for Ulysses, once he realized that Selden wasn't going to quit, I think he pulled back a little bit and just started boxing and getting the win. So yeah, we're going to see Ulysses again. He really doesn't have that world-class power that I think is going to make him a real player in that division. But Selden, we're never going to see him again. And even his corner, were just completely out of their league. They had no idea what to say other than, you're going to do it. You're going to do it this round. Get out there. You're going to do it this round. That was it. Not, hey, cut the ring off, quit following the guy, or go to the body, punch his arms, punch his elbows, punch his shoulders. So even they were out of their league, and you just saw a guy that had been used to this level in Long Island, where the gyms aren't that great, bumping up, you know, in class to that world-class level. And man, it was so evident. In the co-main between Douglas and O'Sullivan, I got to admit, that fight didn't excite me at first, because I thought that Douglas was going to learn from that bad loss he took, that first loss a year or so ago, and just box and have a game plan. But that's not what we saw, man. We saw a guy have absolutely no game plan in Douglas, and O'Sullivan had one. And it just reminded me of how tough boxing is. Man, boxing is such a tough sport. It's so different than any other sport, where you can kind of mindlessly just play, like in American football or basketball, because it's play to play to play, right? And you have teammates, and you have timeouts and half times and all this stuff, where you can constantly change your strategy or whatever. But in boxing, you have to have a game plan. Even when you're sparring. I was going to say, that fight, it almost looked like Douglas kind of was sparring with O'Sullivan. But even in sparring, if it's one thing if you're sparring just to get in shape, but when you're sparring for a fight, when you're in training camp for a fight and you're sparring, you work on different things. You do it with intent. You have the intent of working on certain things. If you're fighting a guy who's more stationary, you're working on straighter right hands, right? But if you're going to be fighting a guy who's more of a mover, you're working on overhand rights, dipping down to your left and shooting that as he's trying to bounce out along the ropes. Same thing with hooks. If you're fighting a guy who's going to be right in front of you, it's short, it's tight little hooks, right? You're down here, boom, tight little hooks. If you're fighting a mover, you're going to dip to your right and throw that looping kind of hook, right? That kind of shot while he's sliding out on the ropes. You work on that stuff in sparring in training camp for a fight. And it just looked like Douglas didn't work on any of that. He just got in shape and went into the ring, and it was evident that he was such a better athlete than O'Sullivan and could move, could do things that the Irishman couldn't do. But the Irishman, number one, had experience. That fight with Saunders taught him a lot. But number two, him and especially his corner, you could tell they had a game plan. I thought his corner did an outstanding job. The new trainer he's working with has really, really improved him by leaps and bounds. But the game plan, they actually were thinking in there and doing things in there, and Douglas wasn't. And once he got cracked real hard, and it was a few big shots he took, you could see Douglas panicking a little bit. It just showed so much in that fight about what boxing's all about and why it's such a tough sport. It's so much harder than any other sport, man. No other sport compares. People say American football compares. It does in some ways, but you can go out there and mindlessly play, because in American football, you're a chess piece. The coach is the guy doing the strategy. He's playing chess with his different chess pieces. That's really what it is. In boxing, you got to do so much thinking on your feet in the moment. You got to do everything with intent, and you cannot take 1 second off in that 3-minute round. It's such a tough sport. And that's how guys like O'Sullivan can just thoroughly beat a guy like Douglas that on paper, or with the eye test, you're looking at them and you're like, yeah, this is going to be a one-sided boxing session, right? That's not what we saw. Now in the main event, what did we learn? Well, some of you out there, particularly the Gennady Golovkin haters, are saying that we learned that David Lemieux's trash. That's not what I saw. What I learned is that Billy Joe Saunders is really, really good. He's legit. And even though this was a completely one-sided 12-round to 0 shutout boxing/sparring session, it was actually more entertaining than I thought it would be. You know, not a fight of the year contender or nothing like that. And Lemieux, for what it's worth, is saying he hurt his hand, I believe, in the second round. But that didn't change the fact that he couldn't cut the ring off and couldn't touch Saunders with anything very, very clean anyway. So I don't care, injury or not, it had no bearing on the fight. This was just, in terms of styles, and you guys got to remember, styles make fights. This was, I mean, Saunders is just all wrong for Lemieux. So wrong for Lemieux. And I tweeted after the fight that we need to all thank Saunders, but because of this, we're going to get the Canelo-Golovkin rematch, which I've been thinking was going to get pushed to September. We're going to get that in May now. Because although I would favor Golovkin to eventually break down and possibly stop Saunders late, I think Saunders is all wrong for Canelo, and I think that he would thoroughly outbox Canelo and win an upset decision. Maybe not in Nevada, but anywhere else, he wins a decision against Canelo. I do think he would outbox Golovkin early. I think in spots it would look a little bit like Golovkin's fight with Daniel Jacobs. I just think that the difference, and it's, again, it would look like the Jacobs fight in the sense that Golovkin would eventually wear him down with power. His punches would move Saunders. He'd be able to touch him because he does cut the ring off, and everything he throws is with intent. And I just think he'd eventually either wear down Saunders or win a close decision, points win against him. And I think Saunders people know that. That's why they're calling out Canelo. And obviously there's more money in the Canelo fight, but I don't think Golden Boy and Canelo's people want to go anywhere near Saunders, because that would look like the Lara fight, except Saunders doesn't run as much as Lara. Actually, I think hits harder and is a bigger, stronger, and yeah, I'm going to say it, more athletic guy than there is Landy Lara. I know some of you out there, that's mind-boggling to consider a concept like that. All that being said, I just wanted to quickly rant about one more thing here. Boxing is in a good place, guys. We're in a very, very good place right now. We are winding down a great year, 2017, great year, yeah. 2018 is not going to be as good as 2017. It can't be. It just can't be. You can't have 2 years like this in a row. It doesn't happen like that in any sport, right? We don't get 2 great Super Bowls in a row, right? Every year in football. You know, there's dips. So 2018 is going to be a bit of a letdown from 2017, but I don't think it's going to be a bad year. I actually think it's going to be a better year than some of the recent years we've had that were really, really down, that were really, really bad. Look at the first quarter of 2018. We've got the World Boxing Super Series semifinals. We're going to get the finals in the spring. So in the first half of the year, we're going to get consolidation at cruiserweight, where we're going to have one unified undisputed champion at the end of that thing. And then at super middleweight, you're going to have at least a top player that comes out of that tournament, and you're going to have some fun all UK domestic level matchups in that tournament, in the semifinals and the finals. And look, yeah, not all the best super middleweights are in that tournament, but you're going to get a clear top guy, and then you've got the Benavidez, you've got the Gilberto Ramirez, those guys that hopefully they can all fight. But what I'm most excited about with just the sport in general, and guys, look past 2018, look at the next 2 to 3 years, from 2018 to 2020, we've got a new era, and this new era is so much better. It's going to be so much better than the last era for a few different reasons. In the last era, we had some great, all-time great level fighters, but they were either residing or owning a division that was weak, like in the case of Vladimir Klitschko, or they were very, very inactive, in the case of Andre Ward, or they were fighting to protect their O and doing all this weight jumping stuff like Floyd Mayweather, and he wasn't the most active guy too. So we had some very good fighters. You had the pound-for-pound phenom and Manny Pacquiao, and to me, he was still the story, the fighter of that last era. He's still hanging on, but who knows, man? Maybe that fight against Jeff Horn was his last fight. Who knows? I hope it is, personally, but we'll find out. Either way, that generation, a lot of them retired this year, fought their last fight, or at least in the case of Pacquiao, we're hoping he's on his way out. But this era, these guys are not going to get $30 million a fight like Mayweather, and they know that. They're not going to be able to put on a complete shit pay-per-view against a hand-picked opponent with a trash undercard, charge 50, 60 bucks, and do a million plus buys like Mayweather and even Pacquiao to a degree were able to do in the last era. They're not going to get these guaranteed network contracts where they can fight layup after layup after layup at their discretion, at their activity level, their preferred activity level, and get paid huge sums of money like Andre Ward did with Rock Nation. Although, you know, Ward did step up and fight Kovalev. Let's give him credit there, although he had everything his way, not just in that fight, but pretty much in his entire career. Those days are over. The game has changed. It's more segmented now with the PBC putting fights on regular television again. That opened things up to a degree, but as that starts to fall apart and continues to fall apart, those fighters are going to have to go across the aisle and work with other promoters to get things done. And this year we saw Daniel Jacobs fight Golovkin, and then he left PBC and Al Heyman, signed with Hearn. Now he's going to be fighting. He got a layup in his first fight back, which is fine. You're coming off that tough loss to Golovkin, fine. Next year, he's in the mix. How about Daniel Jacobs versus Billy Joe Saunders as the co-main for that Canelo Golovkin rematch? How about that? I'll buy that shit all day, right? I think we're going to see more guys like Jacobs know that they have to go across the aisle and make those big fights to get paid what they want to get paid. Or even in PBC, guys like Keith Thurman, he can't fight once a year against whoever the hell he wants. At some point, Thurman and Spence got to fight each other. I think those guys know that. On top of that, Top Rank has taken their whole stable to ESPN. That opens up the floodgates at HBO. You're going to get some Cletus Seldins. You're going to get that because HBO is trying to find fighters. They're trying to find talent. But you're also going to get top guys fighting each other more because they have to. And HBO knows to get ratings, to get people to watch, they got to start matching dudes tough. So I think we're in a good spot because of all of that. But also, the premier divisions, heavyweight, light heavyweight, middleweight, welterweight, even lightweight at some point is going to heat up. But all those classic divisions are red hot right now, man. We have a premier heavyweight in Anthony Joshua. And he's the premier attraction, the premier guy, but he's got a premier opponent in Deontay Wilder. Now, does that fight happen next year? No. It's going to happen in 2019. But if between now and then, Anthony Joshua fights Joseph Parker and takes his title, fights Alexander Povetkin, who is now his mandatory, further consolidates things at the top, and Deontay Wilder fights his mandatory, Dominic Breazeale, and at some point Dillian White will be his mandatory, but he also gets Luis Ortiz, which I think will happen. All that's consolidated at the top. And then the two of them fight in spring of 2019. That's the biggest fight in boxing at that time, figuratively and literally. And it will be a bigger, better fight at that point. Big fights like that take a year and a half or so to make. Just look at Canelo Golovkin. By the time Canelo Golovkin finally happened this year, it was bigger and better because it was built up for a year and a half. So we have some interesting talent in the heavyweight division, but more than that, we have two premier guys at the top. We know who the top two guys are now that Klitschko is retired. And look, Tyson Fury says he's back. He was just cleared to fight again. If that dude gets himself in shape, he's going to make for some interesting fights. And we've got some stuff going on in that division, and it's so, so important. Light heavyweight, Sergey Kovalev, Dmitry Bivol, Artur Beterbiev, Sullivan Barrera, Alexander Gvozdyk. You've got so much talent in that division right now, and these guys know that they have to fight each other because they're not name brands. They're not going to be able to fight whoever they want and get millions and millions of dollars. They're going to have to make fights. They've already shown that they're willing to make concessions and make big fights. We've already seen it to a degree. We're going to get some consolidation in 2018 through 2019, that division, for the first time in a long time, is actually loaded. It was a top-heavy division for really the past decade or so. Now, really the whole top 10 is loaded. At least the top 5 or 6 guys. You've got some real talent in that division, and they're all going to fight each other. Middleweight, you have a real rivalry between Golovkin and Canelo, and depending on how their rematch goes in May, they might do it a third time. Do I think they would go right into a rubber match in September next year? Probably not. Maybe they'd do a tune-up or layup, whatever, and then fight for the third time in 2019. Either way, you've got a rivalry at the top with the top 2 guys. But much like the light heavyweight division, you've got real talent in that division. I just talked about Saunders. I think Lemieux is still a top 10 middleweight. I'm not saying Lemieux's elite. I'm not saying he's an elite craftsman or technician. But remember, styles make fights. And there are other top middleweights that Lemieux would be competitive with because of his style. But you've got Charlo, you've got Andre. Those 2 are new to the division. They have a lot to prove. But once they prove, I mean, look, they passed the eye test and we know what they're capable of. We saw what they did at junior middleweight. Obviously, they're going to be top middleweights once they get in there against top opposition. I talked about Jacobs before. We got Derevyanchenko. We've got Murata. So there's a lot going on at middleweight. Welterweight, we have not 1, not 2, but 3 undefeated American welterweights right now in Terrence Bud Crawford, who's going to be fighting Jeff Horn early next year. So he's going to be the WBO welterweight champion within the next 3, 4, 5 months. Then you got Keith Thurman, who's got 2 titles. And then you got Errol Spence, who's got, I believe it's the IBF title. So those 3 undefeated American-born and bred welterweights. How amazing is that? When's the last time that's happened? Those 3 guys need to fight each other. Now, is it going to happen next year? No. The way the PBC works, we probably got to wait till 2019 before we see Thurman and Spence, but they will eventually fight each other. And maybe 2020 is when we see the winner of that fight Terrence Crawford. But we know that for the next 2 or 3 years, those guys are going to be circling around each other. And eventually, we're going to get consolidation there. We're in a really good spot in that division. The winner that comes out of those 3 fighters in the welterweight division is the next American boxing star, the next American boxing name. So the sooner they all start fighting each other, the better for them. And I mentioned lightweight earlier. Why I think lightweight is going to heat up is because we have a pound-for-pound phenom in Vasyl High-Tech Lomachenko, who's already had titles at 26, 130. I hope and I think he's going to consolidate things at 130 pounds next year against Miguel Berchelt and guys like that. But eventually he's going to move up to lightweight, and he's going to be at 135 pounds where Jorge Linares still is. And I think Linares will still be going strong. And I think because of Linares' hand speed and his style, a fight between him and Lomachenko is going to be a lot of fun. I wish Mikey Garcia would have hung around at lightweight, but he is more of a businessman right now. He moved up to 140. He's going to fight Sergey Lipinets and take his title so he can say he has won titles in 4 weight classes. So pound-for-pound level guy there, Mikey Garcia. I just don't know what else he's going to do at 140 pounds. Eventually, maybe Lomachenko winds up at 140 pounds, but that's probably 2020. So maybe in 2018, we see Lomachenko go to 135. Maybe the end of 2018 into 2019, we see a Lomachenko and Linares fight. And maybe in 2020, we get a Lomachenko-Garcia fight. Either way, I like what's happening there. I hope it all comes together. But if Lomachenko ends up at lightweight and ends up owning that division, then you got a clear top guy in another premier classic weight class in boxing. We could go all the way down to super flyweight. And we're getting Superfly 2 early next year. If that goes well, maybe we get Superfly 3 toward the end of next year or in 2019. Maybe these Superfly cards just end up becoming an annual thing here in Los Angeles. Either way, we've got Rungvisai versus Estrada. The winner of that fight is absolutely a top pound-for-pound player, right? So we got so much happening, and that division's loaded. I could talk about that all day. But guys, we're in a good spot. So yes, 2018 is going to be a little bit of a down year, and a lot of you are already shitting on it, But I'm telling you, we're in a good spot. Look a little deeper, look a little longer down the road till 2019, 2020. Boxing is in a really, really good place. The last era is finally behind us. The new era is finally here. And it's going to be a much better, much more exciting era where top guys fight each other more. It's going to serve the fans better, I believe. We're in a good spot.